It is Friday, December 14th. Let's talk PlayStation. Now, before we get into our first news story, I want to mention real quick, my next video game documentary is finally ready, and I know I spent a long time making it, but if you remember, this past year I did some longer form documentary style videos on the PlayStation Vita, and then I did another one on the PlayStation 4, and many of you thought that was some of the best videos I've ever done on this channel, and I agree, which is why I want to pursue more of them, and I did do another one, and I'm sorry it took so long, but it's coming this Monday, Monday the 17th, 10 a.m. EST. It's going live on the channel, and I want to give you all a quick sneak peek of what it is, so check it out. May 12th, 2005. Microsoft reveals the Xbox 360 on MTV. Days later, on the 16th, Sony reveals the PlayStation 3 at E3. The modern video game battle of the 21st century begins. The PS3 and 360 was such a fascinating war for so many reasons, whether it was the Red Ring of Death, or the PSN hack fiasco, or many other variables that made that console generation so fascinating, but I wanted to retell that story, and it was so fun going back through all the E3 conferences and reading all these old interviews and looking for footage. It was an awesome video to do, and I can't wait to share the story with you this coming Monday. And I want to genuinely ask if you could, if you enjoy the video, please check it out, like it, and definitely try and share it around for me. It would really help me out. If you've got some friends, local gaming circles, local Facebook pages, you know, gaming groups, whatever, try and help me share it around. Doing a video like that nowadays is really scary, where it's super long form and requires a lot of time, and it's on an old topic. Because as a YouTube creator, you're kind of at the heels of YouTube's algorithm. I don't really know how this video is going to do, if it's going to just get uploaded and get lost forever, because it's an irrelevant topic nowadays, but it would really help me out if you could share it around. And I hate asking, but again, it's a long-form content video. It took so long to make. If you could support on Patreon, I would truly appreciate it, and it would help me try to do more of them in the future, or at the very least, more in a timely manner. I want to do more of them, and I probably will, but if you want to see them come out a little bit quicker, that would also help me out as well. But of course, you always do not have to. Anyway, I'm sorry for wasting your time. Let's get into our first news story. PlayStation 4 got a new firmware update 6.20, and sure enough, it's just software stability, which is upsetting because we're really expecting this PSN ID name-changing feature to come quite soon. In fact, we were kind of expecting it to be available in 6.20, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, why it's taking so long. I mean, it was in the beta phase, and maybe that beta phase is the very reason of why we're not seeing it just yet, because it was supposed to be in 6.20 as far as I'm concerned, and perhaps 6.20 lays out some groundwork that is needed for the feature, but if you look in the dynamic menu, there's nothing regarding it being available, so I would assume that you would need a further firmware update to make the feature live, and I'm assuming that's what we'll expect once the feature is ready to come out. Now, this next news story is really awesome, not just because of the game, but because of all of you that watch this channel, because so many of you reached out to me to let me know this was a thing, looking out for me to make sure I got one, and just FYI, I was able to snag a collector's edition, so we're all good there. But it's Limited Run Games. They're doing the Jak and Daxter series, and if you don't know, real quick, Limited Run is exactly what it says it is. It's a small business that does limited releases of digital games that can get a physical release boxed copy, and that's what's great about them. Now, they do very small batches, as it implies, so often it's around 2,500 to 5,000 units for a game. Jak and Daxter, the first game that they're doing so far, got 5,000, and they'll typically split that, so they'll do 2,500 in one round, because they'll sell out so quickly, and then 2,500 about 8 hours later. And I keep tabs on Limited Run anyway, so thank you all so much. I did see it right away, which you really need to if you want to get on top of these things. And they'll be doing Jak 2, 3, and X at a later date, so they haven't really told us anything in regards to that. But what's great about this news story is that Limited Run is actually working closely with Sony in regards to Sony IP. So usually this is for third-party stuff, or smaller developers that can't afford to go through the hassle of printing discs. That's what's great about Limited Run. But now they're working with old Sony IP, so this is awesome. This could mean big news for people that are really into physical games and want to bolster their collection, and more specifically bolster that collection with older PlayStation games that actually are re-released on PlayStation 4. I think that's so cool, and I think when I get my copy, I don't even think I'm going to open it. I think I'm going to leave it sealed and locked away forever. So yeah, this is awesome for sure. So this next one, it's not really news because this is like the same thing every time this like study comes out, or these analytics, mind you. But it looks like PlayStation 4 players are using Pornhub a lot. So if you know, they release this data every so often of the site's usage for game consoles, and Xbox is up there quite high, but PlayStation does have the lead in terms of the pie chart that I'm showing you. And so there you go. I mean, it's not surprising because there's mostly PlayStation 4s in the market. So it would be more surprising if, you know, it was second place and another platform was in front that doesn't have nearly as many units on the market. That would be more surprising. So that's why it's not really news, but it's fun to know that, I guess. So now I want to talk about Death Stranding because recently a new employee at Kojima Productions sent out a very interesting tweet. He said, "Good morning, my third day of joining Kojima Productions, and the past 2 days is like, oh my god, the game is nothing I thought it was." Why is this interesting? Well, because you kind of have to understand where this guy's coming from, which is that he's much like anybody else. He's into games, he plays video games, now he's got a job at Kojima Productions, which congrats to him, that's probably very exciting for him. But he had this idea of what the game might be going into it and realized that it was nothing like he thought it was, which you kind of have to figure that's probably what a lot of us are. We're kind of in the same position. I mean, many of us don't really know what the hell is going on in this game, and that's despite the fact that we've got all these trailers. We've actually got a few trailers now of the game, and we still don't really know what in the hell is going on with Death Stranding. But that's what fascinates us, and that's what excites us about the game, because it's Kojima, and it could be a very different game in terms of how it's approached with game design. And I think that's what's exciting to many of us, which goes into the second part of this, which is that Norman Reedus was recently on a podcast, and he kind of actually detailed a little bit of what the game actually is. And this happened earlier in the week before this tweet from this new employee. So we actually saw Norman Reedus say what I'm about to tell you before this employee said, oh my god, this is like totally different. Anyway, Norman Reedus on the podcast, he was quoted as saying, "It's not the kind of game where you kill everybody in the room. It's a game of bringing people together. How you play it is you're building bridges from here to there. And other people are doing the same, and you connect. And the character that I play is, he's got this phobia of being touched. And as you play the game, the phobia leaves you. It's complicated, but once you're in it, it doesn't seem as complicated. It's constantly surprising you with decisions left and right, and what comes at you. And it's a real brave game. It's visually stunning, and the story behind it, it's a whole nother level, you know? It's not Pac-Man. It's not simple, but the philosophy behind it is one that everybody can get." He also said that he thinks the game's coming out in early 2019, and I think that's like the one thing that we can really write off immediately, because given the timeline of where we are, it doesn't seem this game's even remotely close to being released. And that's not really information that they would trust with the voice talent. He doesn't really need to know that, for example, so I don't think that's really true at all. I would have to imagine it's closer to holiday 2019 at the earliest. But 2019 could be a lot different. Who knows? We could see much more of the game going into the end of the year, and maybe it could be fall or whatever. That's neither here nor there. The fact that he's given a somewhat easy to understand synopsis of the game is what's really interesting, because that is something that they would tell him, because he's in the goddamn game. So he's got lines, he's got a character, he needs to know his place in the game, he needs to know what's going on. So that's good. That's like the first real context we've gotten. Well, the context of it being put in layman's terms, because whenever Kojima wants to talk about the game, of course he's going to be rather vague and speak in metaphors and not really tell us what's going on. So to have Norman kind of give us his version of it in a simpler fashion, I think is really great. Now we've got some perspective, which is that the character might have this phobia that leaves over time, and that certainly is a very interesting mechanic, and it does sound very Kojima to me, which is why I think now I can finally start to get a little bit more excited. Before I was like, okay, I'm excited for Death Stranding, but at the same time, it's like the game's far away. This footage doesn't really tell us much, and so you kind of have to just take it for what it is. But now that we've got this, I think I can kind of start to really put this game together in my head, and now I'm on board. Now, would you believe 7 months down the line that we're still talking about Detroit Become Human after it's released on a weekly basis? I certainly wouldn't either, but Quantic Dream recently announced that the game has sold 2 million copies worldwide, and it's the fastest selling Quantic Dream title ever. And I'm pretty sure they already gave out metrics like that a few months ago, and it was kind of the same thing, where it was like 1 million or so copies, fastest selling title. Well, now it's at 2 million, and it's still the fastest selling, and I would certainly hope so if it was before. But good for Quantic Dream. I really liked Detroit Become Human. I thought it was a fantastic game. And they really need this, considering the past year and so forth. They haven't really had the best press, whether it's a bunch of people just not liking David Cage games, and I can see where they're coming from, but I just don't agree. Or their poor work conditions and their poor work environment, and that's not excusable whatsoever. If even an ounce of any of that is true, it's very deplorable, and they need to do better. And they really need to do better, because they do have a future in the games business, based off the fact that Detroit did so well. But where is this going to go forward with Sony? Because this developer has a very long history and a very good history with Sony, and they're always there with tech demos and whatnot with Sony's new hardware. So just as we're on the cusp of next-gen hardware possibly being revealed in 2019, it begs the question, will we see Quantic Dream demonstrating new technologies on PlayStation 5? And to kind of piggyback off of Tuesday's video about Microsoft's developers, we have to always kind of keep in mind that Microsoft is just like Sony. They scout out developer talent, and that you could very much have a situation where when Microsoft brought on Insomniac to publish Sunset Overdrive, and that was kind of a big surprise to everybody. You know, Microsoft is very aggressive recently. They've been buying a lot of studios, and they could be approaching studios that they know are independent but have a close relationship with Sony like they did before. And, you know, Quantic Dream has said that they want to stay independent. I'm sure there's been conversations there in terms of them being acquired by Sony. That must have happened at some point or the other, and Quantic says no to it, but they still are very persistent in offering many second-party exclusives to Sony. And so it really is, you know, that's what I want to see. I want to see come 2019, what will Quantic Dream do after their most successful title? Will they go multi-platform? Will they partner up with Microsoft? Or will they stay continued with Sony? And will it be in Sony's best interest to offer whatever it is Quantic Dream is asking for to keep them exclusive to PlayStation without necessarily having to acquire them? Because again, I don't think they want to get acquired. Honestly, I could talk way longer about that news story, but let's get into the next one. PS4 sales have crossed over 6 million in the United Kingdom, and just for a little bit of perspective, the country is at 66 million population, so PS4 is almost at about 9-10% of the United Kingdom's population for sales. It's a lot of PlayStation 4s out there. So Sony is really penetrating that market very well, and Microsoft's around a little under 5 million units, so they're actually much closer than you would think, honestly, because it is common knowledge that Sony is well outselling Microsoft in terms of Europe in general. If we're encompassing all of Europe, in most territories and overall, they're doing somewhat of a 3 to 1 lead in most cases, but a little under 5 to 6 million. Microsoft's a little closer if we're talking about the UK, but that's still a lot of PlayStation 4s, and I'm sure Sony's very happy with that. Speaking of the UK, and kind of segueing into our next news story, SIE Europe's Warwick Light was recently talking to the MCV UK and kind of discussing about single-player games and how they still have a significant impact on the industry and how Sony is still very committed to that. He was quoted as saying, "While 2018 was undisputably a big year for Fortnite, it was also a year which saw us really act like a publisher and focus on our exclusive titles, whether it was God of War, Spider-Man, Detroit, or VR titles such as Astrobot. Buzzwords are one thing, what our players are demanding is another. There's still a huge audience for games that offer the best in single-player narrative and stunning gameplay, as witnessed by the enormous popularity of both Spider-Man and God of War in this year's charts. I was just at the Golden Joysticks, God of War won 5. Time and time again, gamers and publications are always questioning the relevance of single-player games, and big budget games, mind you, that are story-driven and such, and Sony's always there to usually reaffirm us that they are very committed to it, and not only that, but they give the data that proves that these games can still thrive in today's climate, which is true given their sales and success. But it does still take a big publisher like Sony to make that happen. Not only is it a big budget, big marketing push, but they're also quality titles that people enjoy and games that people want to buy. So that's always good that Sony constantly keeps giving us this peace of mind that their commitment to these kind of games is not going to change anytime soon. So if you watched the Game Awards, you probably saw that Shawn Layden, Phil Spencer, and Reggie Fils-Aimé, they were all there, but you will notice that Sony didn't make an announcement whatsoever. Reggie Fils-Aimé talked to Jeff Keighley a little bit to announce something, same with Phil Spencer, but nothing for Sony. Well, one fan on Twitter pretty much noticed this right away, and he brought it up to Shawn Layden on Twitter. He actually said, "I have to say I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to see Shawn Layden talk about anything for PlayStation, hoping there's good things on the horizon. I love PlayStation and representing it on Watch Mixer as much as I do with Platinum runs and exclusives." Shawn replied with, "See you in the new year." Oh my god, let's freak out. Well, if we want to actually think about this for a small second here, why would he say that? Because we know that they're not going to be at E3. We didn't have a PSX this year. Why would he say something like that? Clearly, Shawn has something in store. And it's like, I'm not going to go here and kind of divulge into what this could possibly mean. Obviously, he's teasing things for what's going to come in 2019. And I think we all kind of know, we're all kind of expecting it, which is a formal reveal of PlayStation 5. And I would expect that, honestly, at this point, probably past where E3 would take place, because obviously if they were announcing PS5 that it'd be at E3 2019. So I would expect PlayStation 5 to probably be announced probably in the later half of the summer, maybe a little closer to the fall. And that's maybe kind of what he's teasing a little bit, because if you look at that timeline, that's where we'll maybe see a release of The Last of Us Part 2. Ghost of Tsushima has probably got a holiday release, but you don't want to have too much crossover in terms of major exclusives on PS4 and, you know, already announcing and possibly releasing a new platform. So you can have a little bit of crossover, but not much. And so that's kind of what I'm expecting right now in terms of what 2019, how 2019 is going to play out, which is more PS4 games, more PS4 exclusives up until the later half of 2019, where we will see next gen. And just as people are getting excited about what PS5 possibly is, you're still getting this constant stream of fantastic games. Much like PS3, we got The Last of Us in 2013, and we already knew about PlayStation 4 at that point. So I think that's kind of what we're going to be seeing for 2019. And you'll also be seeing Let's Talk Plus. Yes, there's the segue. Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate Owarion Michael. I think that's how you say that. But I will be contacting you soon on Twitter to give you your code. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's super easy. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. You can follow on Twitter. You can subscribe to the channel. You can follow on Twitch. You can retweet something. All these ways that you can get entries. Let me pay for your games, as I often say. We do this every week on Let's Talk PlayStation. And those are all the news stories I want to talk about with all of you from this past week. So if you didn't see, on Tuesday we did a video about Sony and why they should be worried and afraid of Microsoft with the next generation. And that's not bullshit. I'm telling you, man. Some of you got a little upset. I'm sorry. You will never get, you're always going to get my objective viewpoint on things. I don't play the fanboy nonsense. You're being completely ignorant of the situation if you don't think Sony should be carefully watching Microsoft, given what they've done in 2018, which is purchase 7 new developers. And if you want to go into the fine details of that scenario and what I think Sony should be doing and what's going on right now, check out that video. But again, as a reminder, the documentary comes out Monday the 17th, and I would really appreciate it if you could check it out, give me some honest feedback, and also if you enjoy it, share it around, and possibly support on Patreon. It would mean the world to me. But that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecke. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.